And I guess we are live. I hope everybody's seeing us because I think this program works now. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm part of Climate Tracker. And here I have with me, as I see them in my left, Andreas, who is coordinating the European Hub. I have Ayin with me, who will do some amazing social media stuff. And finally, our perfect guest for today, we have Payal Parekh, which is the coordinator, no, the program director of 350.org. So I hope you are joining us from everywhere in the world. We are going to talk today about breaking free from fossil fuels, on how important it is to keep fossil fuels in the ground, to stop burning, to create climate change, but also many other problems. So first of all, we want to give you a bit of context, something really quick, for you to understand what is this campaign about, why is Climate Tracker doing all these things. And I will tell you about this broader campaign we are in. So I'm sure you heard about Break Free from fossil fuels. This campaign, you can Google it or go into the website. It's Break Free 2016. And it's a broader campaign that will happen all over the world, where there will be actions happening in many places to denounce fossil fuels and the impact they are having in our planet and in our societies. And that will be done through direct action, to art, to very inspiring things that will happen all around the world. And Climate Tracker has a bit of a role in here, a very small one, because we are all working together in this, I guess. And the small role that we will have is what Andreas will tell you now.
All right. So let's try to make it actually not that small. I mean, you know that what Climate Track is all about is writing articles, and so what we thought this year that would be very important is that when we think that fossil fuels now are a key thing to talk about, we need to get it out there in the media, and this is where you come in. So in the next 2 months, we will try to get as many articles as possible published in media all around the world and about fossil fuels. So some of you probably already know, and that's why lots of you are watching, is that we have 2 publishing periods, one in April, one in May. And if you publish at least 2 articles on fossil fuels in April, you're in the run for one of 15 scholarships, which will be awarded by the end of April. And if you publish in both phases articles, you're also in the run for one of 2 of our early spots for COP22 in Marrakesh. So not only is this like really important that we shape public debate on fossil fuels, but also you can get something out there for yourself. So yeah, I guess that's what we do right now. So enjoy the webinar.
Yeah, so I hope you started writing and publishing, but we know it's a bit difficult, so that's why today's webinar can be useful. So we will start trying to give you ideas on how to frame things, on how to talk about fossil fuels, and that's why we had this guest today. Finally, before starting the questions, I wanted to ask Ayin, because she's on social media now, how people that are watching us can engage in this call.
Yeah, so definitely, if you have any questions regarding the Break Free campaign, you can always tweet us. Our Twitter handle is @ClimateTracking. Use the hashtag Climate Tracker and hashtag Call for Climate. You can also go to our group, Climate Tracker group, and you can see there the event link. And in the event link, you can post your questions. And then by the end of the webinar, before we end, we will ask Payal all your questions, and hopefully we get to answer them and help you write your article.
Great, thank you, Ayin. So let me introduce you to Payal Parekh. As I said, it's the program director of 350.org, but she has also been campaigning and doing mobilization work like for many years and in many different places. But she also holds a PhD in oceanography from MIT, which is not an easy thing, and she worked for like international organizations. Done work with NGOs, with governments. So quite a good person to ask questions today. So I will start with the very easy one. I'm sure she knows, because the first question is, what is 350.org and what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve?
First, I'd like to thank Anna and the rest of the team at Climate Tracker for inviting me. Having been to many COPs, always very impressed with the work that Climate Tracker does, and I think many of the very good activists I know in the climate field all across the world started out as climate trackers. So thank you for the invitation. Very excited to be here with all of you. 350.org is a climate campaigning organization that was started actually by 7 young people in 2008. We work with grassroots activists all across the world in order to stop climate change. And the main tactic that we use is mass mobilization, because we feel that it's really our greatest asset is power people and people power. So our main goals are the way in which we look to stop climate change is, one is undermine the social license of the fossil fuel industry, and we do that primarily through our divestment campaign. And the divestment campaign has been greatly inspired and learned from the anti-apartheid campaigns that happened in the 1980s to support South African activists fighting apartheid. We also one of the other major ways in which we look to stop climate change is actually by really stopping all of these dirty fossil fuel projects, and that's why I'm here today to talk more about BreakFREE.
Yes, great. Actually, yeah, we are here to talk about fossil fuels, so that's the next question. So we all heard about this BreakFREE from fossil fuel campaign. What is it about? Like, would you summarize it?
Sure. So in May, over 10 days, there will be coordinated mass actions all across the world on 6 continents, I believe in 14 different countries. Young people, old people, teachers, parents, grandparents, union workers are coming together to take action against the dirtiest fossil fuel projects in the world, and demanding that all of the coal, oil, and gas needs to stay in the ground, and that we need to have a just transition to 100% renewable for all. You know, I come from India, and in my country, 300 million people still don't have access to modern energy. And in fact, those communities are the ones that are actually losing their land and livelihoods for coal mines and coal plants, but they're not getting any of the benefits of modern energy. So this is really about all of us taking a stand against this dirty industry and the dirty economy.
Thank you. And I understand that the campaign is very important, but I wanted to understand as well, why is now the moment? Like, what's the good things and the bad things happening now that make it important to push now for ending fossil fuels?
Very good question. There's lots of reasons for it. First of all, last year, 2015, was the hottest year on record. And furthermore, you know, climate change isn't something that's going to happen in the future. It's actually happening now. For example, yesterday I was reading the newspapers where I live now in Switzerland, and one of the main stories was about this drought happening in Somaliland on the eastern coast of Africa, and it's very clearly linked to the super El Nino. A super El Nino because the intensity of this El Nino is much stronger than past El Ninos, and while it's not 100% clear yet, there's growing evidence that the intensity of El Ninos will increase because of climate change. So unfortunately, people are already actually losing their lives because of climate change. On the more positive side, we know in December, all of you climate trackers, many of you I think were probably in Paris, and you saw that all governments of the world have signed on to the Paris Agreement. And in the Paris Agreement, it says very clearly that we must limit warming to 2 degrees, if not to under 1.5 degrees. Which is excellent. Unfortunately, the pledges that and the actions that governments have committed to take are not enough, and that's why it's up to all of us, you and me, and all of our friends, in order to hold governments accountable and push them to fulfill their promises with signing the Paris Agreement.
Wow, great. I mean, like, we probably can perfectly see like why we should break free from fossil fuels. But I also wondered, what is your personal motivation there? I mean, like, there are probably much easier jobs than coordinating this campaign, and what drives you forward there, and why do you get into the struggle?
Yeah, for me, I started out in the early 90s thinking about development in the environment, being from a poor country. And I realized very quickly many of the projects that were being suggested in India, such as mega dams, actually weren't going to get poor people out of poverty, and they actually were destroying the environment. And I thought there has to be a better way. And so for me, I do this personally because I think it's that, it's a cruel irony that the communities that are least responsible for climate change are the ones that are suffering the worst impacts. And on the other hand, I think that this struggle is really a chance, actually, for us to create a new world that's more just, that actually really does get rid of poverty, that gets rid of inequality, and it's an opportunity to ensure that we create energy in a new way, and that the world is more democratic. So I do it because I care about inequality in the world, and I think climate change is the greatest inequality. And at the same time, in human history, I think whenever we are, I think we do a lot of bad things, but we also do a lot of good things, and we can be very innovative and ingenious, and I think this is really our chance. And so I see a lot of hope in it, that we can create a new world that really reflects the value of the 99%.
Wow, thanks. And what I also wondered was, like, well, this we have this global idea of breaking free from fossil fuels, and you mentioned India earlier, but I think the Break Free campaigns also focuses on some countries. So we wondered if you could give us some examples why exactly some specific countries should break free from fossil fuels, like India, like Nigeria, like the US as well.
Sure. In many of the actions, in particular, happening in Australia, Turkey, Indonesia, as well as, I believe, the United Kingdom, and some of the actions in the United States are focusing on coal. And I think, coal is really highlights the worst ills of the fossil fuel industry. It's one of the dirtiest fuels. The climate impact it has is very high. It pollutes our water. It pollutes our air. In fact, in most of the coal belt in India, as well as Eastern Europe, for example, your country, Andreas, Germany, we know that asthma rates are very high because of the mining of coal. And it's, in a way, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So not only while we're burning these dirty fuels so that we can have modern energy, we're also destroying our health. We're destroying our environment. Climate impacts are getting worse, which are impacting the agricultural yields in all countries. So I think this is really why. If we look at Nigeria, in which oil is a big issue. You know, Shell is a big oil concern, and what have they done in the Ogoni land? They've destroyed the land of indigenous people. It's resulted in actually killings of activists such as Ken Saro-Wiwa. It's left the Ogoni people with land in which their all of their water sources are heavily polluted. So we need to get off fossil fuels because while they have given us access to energy, and we know that when we have access to clean energy, it does improve the quality of our lives, it's also left us with a lot of negative aspects, and primarily the poorest members of our global community suffer the worst impacts. And that's why we know there's another way. And so for every country, we need to break free from fossil fuels so that we can get rid of all of the bad aspects and power our economies on clean energy that doesn't pollute our air, that hopefully doesn't take away the land and livelihood of indigenous peoples, poor farmers, and in fact improves the quality of their life by giving them access to clean energy.
Okay, thanks. Just one short question on that. If I read the news a bit, I kind of have read that I think like every fourth, like quarter of European countries now coal-free, and on the other hand, countries like India have massive plans for new coal plants. So I'm wondering, isn't this transition already happening in Europe? And isn't it also the case that maybe India needs that stuff, or why do we then really still have these fossil fuels?
It's true in parts of the industrialized world, in particular in Europe, we do see that the transition is happening, and it's our job as activists in order to we want to increase this momentum. Right, it's happening, but it's not happening fast enough. So we want to make it faster, and there is no question that we need to have that countries such as my native country, India, or Ain's country, Philippines, needs more energy. There is no question. But we also know that alternatives exist, and that's why we really need to focus on the alternatives and leapfrog the dirty industrial pathway that the industrialized countries have taken. And of course, we know that means that those countries that are most responsible for climate change, they also have a responsibility to provide financing, and in some cases technical know-how, although I do know that my country we have a lot of really smart engineers, and often ingenuity and innovation comes about in those regions of the world where people are where they have the least access to resources, because innovation comes through that.
And speaking of innovation, we also wonder, like, if you could give us some example of some very positive developments, like where renewables really are increasing, and why might that be the case, and why it's so important?
Sure. So first of all, what's very exciting to see is that last year 90% of new electricity generation actually came from renewables. And we also saw for the first time that fossil fuel emissions didn't increase. We need them to come down, and at a very fast rate, but we do see that the tide is turning. And I think some examples are, if we think about the country of Scotland, or we think about the country of Denmark, in which in renewables are playing an increasing percentage of their energy is being created by renewables. I don't have the statistics on hand. Maybe one of you might know them. And we know that it's because there have been people's movements demanding this, and which has forced governments to enact policies that support the development of renewable energy. And if we could just imagine shifting all of the subsidies that the fossil fuel industry gets to support the renewable energy industry, I think we would even increase the ever more increase this this transition.
Okay, I think it's time for Andreas and Ayin to speak as well, because they also can provide their perspectives on their countries, I guess. So, Ayin, I hope you are not too busy with social media. Let us know, why do you think Philippines or Southeast Asia needs to break free from fossil fuels?
Yeah, actually, it's quite concerning that Southeast Asia, for example, the Philippines and Indonesia has been investing a lot in fossil fuels. The Philippines, for example, has invested a lot of new coal power plants, and the reason being is that we need more energy. This is what Payal said, and that the government still believes that renewable energy is very expensive and that we don't have the capacity, technologically and financially to invest in renewable energy. So that's one of the major problems. And also, the government has been telling again and again that the Philippines doesn't contribute a lot to carbon emissions. So this is the excuse that it's okay to pollute more. But, we also have a lot of energy potential, and there's a study that says our renewable energy potential is actually can actually answer our energy needs. So for me, like in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, even if we are a low carbon emitter, it's not an excuse. There are communities who live near coal power plants who have high respiratory diseases, who experience human rights violations such as land grabbing. So, coal really, investing in coal is not the way to go forward, especially that the Philippines is one of the most climate impacted country in the world. So I think it's just logical that we break free from coal.
Yeah, I think Andreas will agree with this on breaking free from coal, because Germany has very big coal mines as well. What do you think about that?
Well, very true. In fact, I live in the area of Germany and in Saxony, where lots of coal plants are. And what we, for example, can see that there's a lot of brain damage happening to children from mercury, which is an emission of coal plants. So I think, like, just in the terms of health, it makes a lot of sense to break free from fossil fuels here. So if you incorporate all this additional cost in terms of health, in terms of pollution in the environment, renewables are just so much cheaper than these dirty fossil fuels. What we also see in Europe, I think in general, is that we actually have an energy overcapacity. So we actually have too much energy, and that's why lots of these coal plants have been shut down. That's what we have seen in Scotland. That's what we also have in Germany. But for some reason, this transition is not happening as fast as I think it could and has to happen. So, for example, we just had a new feed-in tariff, or we are just talking about a new feed-in tariff law in Germany, and that basically one of the plans of this feed-in tariff law is to decrease the growth of renewables, and that's just nuts, like that's so super stupid, and I have no idea why that would make sense. I do have an idea why politicians might do that, because, for example, the Social Democrats in the German government are very close to working unions that are in favor of coal mining. But if we think of the whole society, definitely the majority is not profiting from that. If we think of the UK, there are massive plans for fracking right now, and people don't agree with that. So I think definitely agree to Ayin and also what Payal said earlier, that if we want to do something for people, if we want to really save the climate, we have to be more ambitious in Europe. And I think in the end, that's not only good for climate environment and for justice reasons, but also economically simply makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. So I like this idea of, the majority is not profiting. So there's some people that are profiting, and I guess we all know who they are, because in all all over the world, all over countries, we have the same thing. No, there's some majority, there's some, let's call it 1%, that is profiting from fossil fuels, and by having less renewables or putting more coal mining or powered plants by coal. So I guess this will not be an easy transition. We know the power that the 1% has. So that will be my question for Payal now. Do you think this will be an easy transition? I think we already know that no. But...
Yeah, I think anything that's ever been worth doing has not been easy, right? From the fight to women's rights, to independence in India, to getting rid of apartheid in South Africa, to the civil rights movements in the United States. Of course, it won't be easy, but it's worth fighting for. And exactly as you said, we do still see, though, that the tide is starting to shift. We see, things like the Panama Papers coming out that are showing us very clearly what the 1% does, how they try to undermine democracy, how they try to get out of their responsibility. But again, as I said before, this transition is really a chance, and we have to fight for it. But what it can mean is actually that we have jobs that work not only for people, but also work for the planet. Because it doesn't make sense to have a coal plant in which, while the workers may have been unionized in Germany, it's actually destroying their health and destroying their planet. And nowadays, the coal plants that are coming up in places like my country, India, they are not even allowing the people to unionize. So even increasingly, unions and workers are seeing that we need to get rid of this ill, and there's another way to create jobs and people-powered economy that actually, instead of pitting the environment against workers, actually brings them together.
Yeah, I think we have one more question for you, and that's, okay, we see all these things happening, all these bad sides of fossil fuels, on how it affects our democracy or economies, and yeah, we are young writers trying to make an influence on that, but I think we all find it very difficult. What would you suggest us? What would you say, hey, what can we do to help?
Yeah, so I think if any of you live near an action, actually it would be wonderful to have you participate and to report on it. I see that Ayin is amazing during this event, sending out tweets, sending out live tweets, writing, maybe doing a live blog while you're attending one of the events. If in the lead up, writing articles, in particular, if there's an action in your country or region of the world, in order to explain to people from your region why we're doing this. I also see that if you are not near an action, during the actions we're going to be at 350.org setting up a system in which you can be an international observer, where you can watch the actions, you can amplify the messages coming out of the actions on social media, and in the case that if activists are targeted and police decide to start arresting or mistreating activists, that you can be an international observer and get the word out that activists are being mistreated. So I think there's a lot of ways in which actually writing and reporting and amplifying the messages would be extremely helpful, and is just as important as those that are going to be out on the streets or at the fossil fuel sites participating in the mass actions.
Yeah, so I think she has been gathering some more questions from you all. So if you are seeing us live, tweet them or put them on Facebook or all these amazing things that Ayin is checking now. So she will jump with some questions that you all asked.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions here. The first question is actually quite interesting. So Pavlos from Greece is asking about the connection of Panama Papers to the fossil fuel industry. If there's any information on persons or countries or companies that are involved in the scandal with ties to the fossil fuel industry.
Yes, unfortunately, there are lots of connections. In fact, this morning, I'm a bit older than all of you, so how I start my day is with a cup of chai and the paper version of the newspaper. And this morning, in fact, in an article I read, was in fact that Zuma, the president of South Africa, his nephew, he was in the Panama Papers, and because of setting up an offshore account, in fact, he was able to get some lucrative oil and gas contracts. So there's a clear example. We know that there are lots of links to Russian politicians and the Panama Papers. And in fact, I believe that something, people are still doing the analysis, but something like over, I think, 15 oil and gas companies have been named. So the information is coming out, and in fact, at 350.org, we're hoping soon to publish a blog that makes clear the link between politicians and the fossil fuel industry and offshore accounts.
Okay, thank you. So I hope that answers Pavlos' question. Another question from our Twitter. How big is the influence of the fossil fuel industry in the coming US elections? So we know that the US elections is very important, and the US is one of the biggest polluters in the world. So one of our trackers want to know how big is the influence of the fossil fuel industry, and how will the US elections probably affect, our campaign for clean energy?
Very good question. So, as many of you know, in the United States, they don't have any rules on donations to political campaigns. I'm not from the U.S., so I don't have the statistics, but we know very clearly that oil and gas firms in the United States are part of the 1%, and they heavily finance campaigns of Democrats as well as Republicans. And 350 local activists, in fact, in the United States, are demanding of Hillary Clinton that she not take any money from the fossil fuel industry. So we already have activists working on that. The United States is still the most powerful country in the world, and naturally it will have an impact. And we know that if the Democrats are elected, given that President Obama did try to make climate a center of his administration, he could have done much more than he's done. Naturally, if a Democrat comes in office after him, we have a much better chance that the United States will continue along this pathway. And of course, grassroots activists in the United States are going to continue to pressurize the government.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. And maybe a little bit connected to like how governments um, try to respond to the call for investing in cleaner energy. We have a question from Africa, from Ghana. So we have a climate tracker who has been engaged in action and is part of an organization, a youth organization in Ghana, actively campaigning against coal power plants. But he says that the government does not seem to want to listen. And the question is, how can we engage the government when they are not listening, or when they are not prepared to take on the suggestions of investing in cleaner technology? How else can we engage with the government?
Very good question. I'm not someone who my area of expertise and pushing for social change is not through the lobbying and advocacy channel, so I won't be very good at answering what are some of the techniques you can do there. But from the mass mobilization side or campaigning side, I think it's really being able to show elected officials that there is a mass movement of people that want this, and of course we can do that through creative actions, not just demonstrations, but perhaps through flash mobs, through Twitter storms. It's also always very interesting to be able to show demonstration projects, to be able to show in your country some examples where it has worked, as well as examples from other countries, so that politicians see, A, that it's possible, and two, that there is actually a mass movement of people within your country that want this.
All right. Thank you again for answering that question. I think this is very relevant and helpful, especially for young people in countries where their opinions are not heard by the government, and is asking like, what else can we do? So I think that's a very valid point. And we have another question. The question is, so for developing countries, especially, a lot of the countries are insisting that we should keep on investing in coal or in other fossil fuels because we need more energy. People need more access to energy. We need fossil fuel to develop our economies. And this has been, a recurring, I say, excuse of governments. But what is the best way to answer these points which they throw at us?
Sorry, Ayin, could you repeat the question?
Okay. What is so a lot of developing countries say that there's still a need for fossil fuel, so that we can develop our countries more, and that more people need access to energy. So this is kind of the excuse that governments are making to continue investing in dirty energy. So the question is, what do we say to them? They say we need this to develop our economy, but what's the best answer for that?
Sure, this is a very tough crowd. Very good questions. These are quite big questions. We know that we need to keep at least 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. From an equity perspective, we can say the little amount of fossil fuels that still that still could be burned. Naturally, it should be developing countries that should have the first access to them. But look, long run, most of the developing countries in the world, in particular, take yours, Ayin, the Philippines is also very vulnerable to climate. So to use, unfortunately, a very violent expression, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So we're saying we're wanting to develop by using fossil fuels, but actually we're increasing the climate impacts, which means more people in our country start to die, our agricultural yields go down. So it just doesn't make any sense. Secondly, in many of the developing countries in the world, there is massive potential for solar, and there is massive potential for wind. And this is, again, a chance. Do we want to be part of the old system that's dying? Do we want to build up an infrastructure that's actually a dinosaur, as opposed to be at the forefront of the new economy? And finally, I would say that many of our people in our countries are in very far remote areas, and why do we want to spend billions of dollars building up an infrastructure when actually decentralized renewable energy can get them the energy they need much more quickly and much more cheaply? And then the final point is, we know, the very final point, especially because you're climate trackers and all of you are very involved in the COP process is that we have to continue to demand that the countries that are most responsible for climate change are financing this transition and providing technical know-how. And I think this is where all of you can play a very important role, no matter what country you are in, and demanding this.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope all the trackers that are listening to us, they want to demand this as well. Do you think you have any more questions, Ayin? I think that's all.
All questions are good, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's all. If there's no more questions and any of you want to add anything, Payal, do you want to say something just to close the session?
I want to thank all of you, Anna, and the other climate trackers, for Ayin and Andreas for organizing this. I want to thank all of you for the very, very good but difficult questions. And finally, I encourage all of you to go to breakfree2016.org, and I hope to see you at one of the actions, or if not that, to see you amplifying the messages through your writings, through your Twitter accounts, through your Facebook posts.
Yeah, we will do for sure. And thanks to you, it was awesome to have someone to tell us more about the campaign and to explain us why we should break free from fossil fuels from that many different perspectives. So I guess we are closing now. I will try to summarize a bit and remind you what is all this campaign for people that may have joined late or something. We were very on time, so if you woke up late, if you're in Europe or things like this, you may have it late. So we were talking about why we should break free from fossil fuels. So we saw that the fossil fuels cause climate change, everybody knows that, but they are also part of an old system that we want to leave behind. We want to no longer belong to this 1% controlling fossil fuels and how we have energy. So we've seen corruption and tax havens. We were talking about the Panama Papers and how they are linked to the oil industry. There's revolving doors. There's the U.S. elections being funded by fossil fuels industries, like even Democrats and the Republicans. Then we've seen how this affects the most vulnerable and how this affects, let's say, health. Andreas was putting an example about coal in Germany and how that creates respiratory system problems and things related with mining and stuff. But also affects the environment, and we see pollution. I imagine the Delta in Nigeria and things like this. And what we more or less, I think we all thought is that we need to start this revolution, and that's where we play a role. So this revolution has to be fair and transparent. We see the Panama Papers, has to be transparent, and has to lead us to a 100% renewable world. And that's where our role is. So let's push for that. Let's bring this transition, this amplify the voices that the Break Free campaign is trying to have, and do this as climate trackers. I think Payal was to add something else, so come in.
Yes, so I just checked quickly that in fact my colleagues are in the United States have said that fossil fuel interests, so maybe not directly industry, but those who have worked for the industry and made their money that way, have apparently pumped $3.25 million into the largest fund that's supporting Hillary Clinton's 2016 election cycle. So we see that in the United States, both parties receive money from the fossil fuel industry. Just wanted to share that little fact with all of you.
Yeah, I'm sure that all the US writers that were taking notes, they will all put it in the articles now. So now let me remind you about the publishing windows and all this, because it can get a bit confusing. Andreas explained it very well in the beginning. Let me do it in the end and see if you are listening. So we are now in the first publishing window, which started this week and will last until Friday next week, which is the 15th. And here you have to publish 2 articles if you want to be part of this fellowship. We will have 15 fellowships. People will be trained to write and encouraged to write. So please try and do that. But then if you don't make it to the fellowship, or if you make it, so there's another point, which is going to COP22. So if you write 3 articles during all the span of the campaign, so it will finish in the 15th of May, you get a chance to go to COP22 with all of us. So I was the fellow in COP20, Andreas and Ayin were in COP21. You see, we are all happy and amazing people, so I'm sure you are as well, and you want to join our team. So yeah, let me say that again. So we have 2 publishing windows, fellowships, and COP22. I guess all these and wanting to end fossil fuels are really good reasons to want to join us. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Andreas, Ayin, and thank you very much, Payal, for your time. And I hope we will see you soon. And here I stop the broadcast. So see you, trackers.